Uh, okay, so we're recording. Um, we're just going to take a couple more seconds to see if some other people show up, and then we're going to begin with some prayers and so forth. How are we doing? Are people following? So far, the beginning of chapter 6 is quite simple, right? Yeah, no problems yet. No big problems. Okay, so Mary Ellen, would you like to put up the beginning prayers? Okay, so we'll begin with taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chushe gipe sognam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, I had said chushe, meaning for myself, explaining the Dharma or discussing the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangchu baru dagni kapsuchi dagi chunin gipe sognam ki drola penchir sangye drupasho. And then thinking with a mind that's thinking, the Buddhist teachings are so precious. I'm going to offer my whole universal experience in the form of a mandala to create the merit to be able to be successful in, listening and meditating and so forth. We'll offer this short mandala. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm. So in other words, you imagine the actual world system. You might imagine our Earth, the sun and the moon around it, the 4 continents either on Earth, or as some lamas say, the 4 continents maybe meaning, maybe Earth is Zambuling, Jambudipa, and say Venus, Mars, and maybe Saturn are some of the other continents, who knows? But you imagine, first of all, you visualize that, and then you transform it, or say visualize it as a Buddha realm. May all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down, release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. So as you say that word, you imagine the visualization that you created as moving forward into the heart of the central Lama of the merit field, and that he is, happy, sort of says, content that you are creating some virtuous karma, and is ready to send down a deluge of the vast and profound Dharma. So now let's meditate, sit comfortably. Back erect, body relaxed, mind relaxed. Watch your heart. Turn to your breathing. You don't have to control it. Once you recognize the breathing, hold it in mindfulness, recognizing when you're breathing in and breathing out, and in addition, as in the sutras, whether it is a long breath or a short breath, to the exclusion of everything else. check yourself, whether you're paying attention to your eye consciousness. Let go of that, your ear consciousness, your body consciousness. Usually your nose and tongue consciousnesses are not so obvious. If you've been successful, if you're doing this on your own, if you haven't been successful in calming the mind, you continue on to maybe 21 respirations or more, whatever you need to calm the mind. But if you have been successful, turn your attention now to the mental consciousness and its content and its contents, thoughts, images, afflictions, virtuous mental states, and so forth. Then recognizing the substratum behind them, the conventional clear light nature of the mind, taken here as a non-affirming negation, the lack of any obstruction to the arisal or dismissal of those contents of the mind. Perhaps more difficult to comprehend than taking the just the mere clarity of the mind as a positive phenomena. The very presence of content to the mind, once you're familiar, being used as a reason, as a sign that the mind lacks any obstruction, because those thoughts couldn't be present if there was obstruction in the mind. In the same way, the presence of a boulder in ordinary life can be used as a sign to indicate that where the boulder is, there is no obstructing contact of space. This conventional clear light nature of the mind is with us always. Once we've recognized it, identified it, and understood its significance, that we can develop all good qualities. There's nothing that we lack now. There's nothing that we need in order to gain realizations. By applying our attention to the teachings and putting them into practice, we can do the great experiments of the past in the laboratory of the mind to generate renunciation, bodhicitta, the right view of emptiness. All that's hindering us now is lack of confidence, laziness, and familiarity with the teachings. We can develop positive qualities that we might admire, a sense of renunciation of the hardships of this life, compassion and empathy for others, deep wisdom that sees the actual state of reality of things, is not perturbed. We can do so in order to become a better person or to become liberated from cyclic existence. But the greatest goal that we can aim for is that of omniscience. Why would we aim for that rather than nirvana? Because all living beings are experiencing the same suffering that we are. The very nature of cyclic existence is like having a load of thorns, thorn bushes tied to your back, like the Nepali people who are carrying their loads back to their house to burn in the stoves and so forth. Every which way you turn within cyclic existence, it is suffering. All sentient beings are experiencing that, even those who will quote to you how happy they are, how superior they are because they are powerful and wealthy and enjoy all the senses, all of the perfect tastes and appearances and tactile sensations of clothing and sexual embrace and everything. All of them, from a Buddhist perspective, are the nature of suffering. They never satisfy us. All sentient beings are experiencing that. And most of them are mostly experiencing suffering, not even samsaric happiness, which is of the nature of suffering. They've all been intimately related with us in the past and are exactly equal with us in wanting to be free of suffering, wanting to be happy. So thinking for their benefit, it would be wonderful, it would be imperative to become enlightened, to become a Buddha, to lead them without error out of suffering into everlasting happiness. But to do that, to become a Buddha, we have to develop bodhicitta. We have to have the wisdom of emptiness. And with those two, accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, which are the causes of the Buddha's form and wisdom bodies, the Rupakaya and Dharmakaya. In order to do that, we need to know how to accumulate those collections, how to generate bodhicitta, how to meditate on emptiness, which are explained in Chandrakirti's great Madhyamakavatara and explained, commented on by Lama Khapa in his Kompa, Illuminating the Intent, or Illumination of the Intent, however you like to translate it, which is the topic that we're studying. So think, for that purpose of achieving enlightenment, for the benefit of sentient beings, I'm going to listen, contemplate. That means analyze what is being said. And when we come to correct resolution of points, hold it in mind for some moments by meditating on it with concentration. During the class today, we're going to participate in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm participating. So almost like with a great joy, thinking oh, I'm going to be able to accumulate these causes of Buddhahood for the sake of sentient beings by listening today. That's the reason for participating. So, bringing your attention back to the present. How are we doing? Anyone have a question about our meditation at the beginning? We've done several times. Rachel is here from Tushita. Rachel? No? Where are you?
I'm in Tabu.
Wow. In India.
Yes.
Wow. We have a large range of participation today. Nice to see you again after a while. So anyone have a Dharma question or a Dharma itch before we begin? Sumvash has. You need some scratching.
Yes, Venerable George. I do. I've been thinking about this a little bit. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. I guess my question is like this, that, verse number 2 says that make all the previous perfections transcendent by conjoining it with wisdom. And I think one of the things that you said last time was, well, the 3 spheres, emptiness of the 3 spheres.
Right.
And my question is just a little bit more on that, which is, how do I know that I've actually, whatever I'm doing, I've actually conjoined it with the 3 spheres? I mean, I have some understanding of the 3 spheres.
With the emptiness of the 3 spheres.
What? Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
What is the flavor? How do you know that you've done it correctly?
Right.
That's my question.
Right. So you could say, what's the criterion? What's the borders of having done that? So we've mentioned before sometime, whether sometimes people think they've realized emptiness when they haven't. They're just identifying some kind of experience they have as emptiness. So the same thing here. You will know as you progress. Say, for instance, when you're meditating on the emptiness of the self, that's where it's perhaps most apparent at first, because that's the first kind of the tangible realization of emptiness that we have, as explained. We've talked about it several times in the scriptures. Sometimes the emptiness of phenomena is explained first, like the emptiness of the chariot and so forth, or phenomena. But when you talk about realization, it's the emptiness of the person that's realized first. And you can get a taste of whether you have a little insight into emptiness when you do that meditation. If you can kind of have the feeling that as you're meditating on that, because let's assume that none of us have fully qualified shamatha. Maybe we have a little bit of concentration, but in meditating on that, on the emptiness of the person, if you have a feeling that your previous conception of yourself was completely bananas. I don't know if you know that. That's American expression.
Yeah, I do.
Completely ridiculous, off the wall. It has no justification. In periods like that, if you can have some feeling like that, or when you analyze other phenomena, your coffee mug, or your I have my insulated thermos mug for my water. If you can have the feeling that what is appearing to your eyes is not how it actually exists, that's, I think, some evidence that you're beginning to get some taste of emptiness. Not just saying it in words, but actually having some inner feeling about that. So you've probably heard many teachings on emptiness where the four essential points are mentioned and meditating on emptiness and so forth. But until you actually engage in the meditation, all of that is on the intellectual level, maybe not really really touching your own ego grasping. So you need to meditate in order to do that. So the criterion of whether you've meditated on the emptiness of the three spheres gets down to whether you have some sense of of having realized emptiness. And you have to think of some concrete thing. So let's say the emptiness of the person. So if you have some kind of feeling that if you take the three spheres as meaning the person, let's say, dedicating myself, I'm dedicating these merits, and the object dedicated to the achievement of realizations and the state of Buddhahood and so forth, and the action of dedicating, connecting these merits with those results. If you have a feeling that the person who is dedicating is merely imputed, that the way that it appears to your mind seems to be inherently existent, but it doesn't exist that way at all, that could give you some confidence. That might be a criterion of whether your meditation on the emptiness of the three spheres is actually doing anything. Still, we practice. Even if you don't have that feeling, we get used to this so that later when we do have, say, as we get further into the 6th chapter, the reasonings come up to explain why phenomena are empty, and we meditate on those. So then when you do have some experience, you're already familiar with this, and you eagerly apply your realization to that practice at that time.
Okay, I'm curious if sometimes you can do meritorious things, but as long as you don't make a big deal of it, would you say that's moving in the right direction?
Yeah, you could say that.
I mean, it's one
example that's come up recently. Someone, I had lost one of the lenses of my glasses in my room. I couldn't find it, and Doris, I was talking to Doris at the time, and she said, "Get your flashlight out and see if it reflects off the lens." It turned out I was just able to see the lens with the flashlight, but it brings up this famous example that a king, a crown has dropped on the floor in the presence of the king, some jeweled ornament maybe, and the jewels are spread out, and they're trying to find them. And it's said that even seeing a facet of light reflecting off the jewel, that's not the jewel. You haven't seen the jewel yet, but by following that facet of light, it will lead you to the jewel. And in the same way, say, simply having some beginning understanding, like letting go, letting go of the self, or letting go of the object that you want to offer, that's kind of like a facet that by following that, by pursuing that further with analysis and so forth, you'll actually get to that jewel of realization of emptiness. So I think that's a good start, right? Does that make sense? So
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
oh, yeah. Okay, good question. Okay. So anyone else? Karen, anything? Where's your partner today? He's off.
Yes, he texted you this morning. He has a conflict.
Oh, I didn't see that text. Okay. Okay.
You'll get it after.
Okay. So I'd like to begin with another quotation. When Geshe Zopa taught this section on chapter 6, this is a quotation he gave. After the two quotations, we had the last couple of weeks quotations from the Kadam father teachings, right, about the boat, like being a person in a boat in this perilous situation of samsara and so forth. So here's another quotation from Lanrim Chemo. If you have Geshe Zopa's commentary on that, it's in the first volume on page 83. This is a quotation from as is translated here, the exhortation to wholehearted resolve, or the Laksam Kula Sutra. So Laksam is what we often call the extraordinary thought, right, in the sequence of bodhicitta, when you talk about the recalling all sentient beings have been your mother, recalling their kindness, developing a determination to repay their kindness, heartwarming love, great compassion. And then the sixth element of that is called laksam, or you could call it universal responsibility, or here is called wholehearted resolve. This is a famous sutra. So the actual quotation Geshe gave comes after this first two stanzas of that. First one says, I have not practiced. Now what can I do? This is a thought that can come up at the time of death, right? At death, the immature person faces this anguish and meets unfathomable extreme suffering. This is a fault of taking delight in mere words, like we all do. The same sutra continues, like a person in a crowd watching a performance, or one who brags of the qualities of other heroes, their own real practice is inferior. This is a fault of taking delight in mere words. Okay, so I mentioned those two stanzas because they're coming right before this essential quote that's quoted in so many sutras, so many teachings. The husk of the sugar cane has no essence at all. We've talked about this before. You know what sugar cane is, right? I don't know. Maybe some people in the West, we've never experienced it. Sumvash, you have sugar cane in the place in India where you
yes, Venerable George, I have in India, in Punjab. I've actually gone into the fields and enjoyed sugar cane by breaking it and then removing the husk. And
okay, so here we're talking about the husk. So the husk itself, if you chew on the husk, you get some kind of sweet flavor, but it's not much at all, right? You want to remove the husk and get down to the nitty-gritty, the core where the juice is. And the people who have these machines, they put the husk in one side, and there are these gears that crush it down, and all the sugarcane juice comes out. So that's coming not from the husk, that's coming from the core. So the stanza says, the husk of the sugarcane has no essence at all. It's just like peripheral, it's just like superficial. The most delightful taste lies within. By eating the husk, one cannot obtain the sugarcane's delicious taste. You won't be blown away by eating the husk. You think, this is nothing. Sugarcane is nothing special if you just eat the husk. Just as it is with the husk, the sutra continues, so it is with mere words. Just as with taste, the meaning is found upon reflection. So even the words, you know the 8 freedoms and 10 endowments, or the meditation on impermanence, or the different kinds of meditations on emptiness and itself. If you haven't contemplated it, you don't get to the essence. Just as with a husk, so it is with mere words. Just as with taste, the meaning is found upon reflection. Therefore, avoid delighting in mere words. Always be conscientious and reflect on the meaning. So Geshe-la's commentary in this text, he gave another commentary when he taught Gompa Rapsal at that time, but this has been edited so it's easy to read. Sugarcane has a very sweet and delicious taste, but you cannot experience that flavor by eating only the peel, the husk, right? The essence of its taste lies within. As in this example, someone who only appreciates the words of the Dharma but fails to put them into practice has not tasted the actual meaning of the words. So that's sort of relevant to Suvanshi's question about how do you know whether you've actually meditated on the emptiness of the 3 spheres. As in this example, someone who only appreciates the words of the Dharma but fails to put them into practice has not tasted the actual meaning of the words. They miss the essence. The Dharma that they have heard is like a sugarcane husk. The serious practice of the path is the real essential taste of the Dharma. Therefore, you should avoid settling for the pleasure of the mere words alone. It doesn't mean that you should disregard the words of Dharma, but you should not be satisfied until you have tasted their essence by putting the meaning of the words into practice, and then assiduously pursue their meaning with analysis and meditation. So there's another quotation from another sutra that follows on in the Lanrim Chemo at this point. Rely on the teachings, not the person. So in other words, you shouldn't be, when you engage in listening to the Dharma, you shouldn't be filled with interest in the charisma of the person who's teaching or their status or something like that. Rely on what they're teaching. Then rely on the meaning, not the mere words. So once you've given up your interest in just the charisma of the person or fascination in being there, relying on that, rely instead on the words. You should rely on the meaning, not just the words themselves. And then among the words, you should rely on the definitive meaning, not the interpretable meaning. That means the meaning that is leading to emptiness. And once you've determined the definitive meaning, the meaning of emptiness, rely on gnosis or exalted wisdom, not on dualistic cognition. So wanted to present that first as a motivating factor here. So we are going to continue. We are on, let's see here, in Anne Klein's translation, page 154 in Path to the Middle. In Jinpa's book, 161, the last paragraph of that. So we have just talked about some of the prophecies of Nagarjuna that were found in the Lankavatara Sutra, the descent into Lanka Sutra that just came right before. And it was stated that Nagarjuna will expound the definite vehicle or the definitive vehicle, which is free from the two extremes of existence and non-existence. This prophecy refers to the Laichivi youth, Loka Priya Darshana. So Laichivi, does anyone know what Laichivi means? When I say Laichivi youth, does that mean like Sudanese or American or Russian, or what does that mean? Laichivi refers to the people in Vaishali, which was one of the central regions where the Buddha taught. So this is talking about this when the Buddha was in that region, and there was this one boy. Actually, he's missing, when he says Loka Priya Darshana, he's missing part of the actual name. It's actually Sarva Loka Priya Darshana, means one who is, pleasing to the sight whenever they see him by all the world. And so that is the name of a boy in the presence of Shakyamuni Buddha, who the Buddha prophesied, and it's also mentioned in the Golden Light Sutra, which some of you may know of in our recitations and so forth. He was talking about this young boy who would later take birth as Nagarjuna. So the Great Cloud Sutra states, when it has been 400 years after my death, this youth will become a monk known by the name of Naga and will propagate my teachings. Finally, he will become a king called Gyanakaraprabha in the realm known as utterly transparent light. So Anne translates that a little bit differently. 400 years after I, Shakyamuni Buddha, pass from sorrow, that means die, this youth who is liked when seen by all the world, so like universally likable, right, will become a monk known as Naga. So this is clearly indicating Nagarjuna, and will disseminate my teaching. Finally, in a land called very pure light, which Chimpa puts as the Sanskrit, he will become a conqueror named light, which is a source of all wisdom. So this is talking about prophecy of when he will become a universal teacher. So the actual quotation that Chandrakirti quotes is a little bit different. It's referring to Ananda. Chandrakirti in the Madhyamaka Bhasham, which Lama Tsongkhapa is paraphrasing here, Buddha's actually talking to Ananda, his attendant. Ananda, 400 years after I passed beyond sorrow, this youth of light Shivi called pleasing to be seen by all sentient beings, having become a bhikshu called Naga, and superbly revealing my doctrine extensively, finally in the realm of the world called exceedingly clear light, we will become the Tathagata Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha called Gyanakaraprabha. So Lama Tsongkhapa truncates it a little bit. So Lama Tsongkhapa then continues, after quoting the Great Cloud Sutra, he says, these citations, meaning the previous one from Alankavatara Sutra and this one from the Great Cloud Sutra, they establish with certainty, therefore, that there exists in the definitive scriptures an undistorted prophecy of Nagarjuna. So I wanted to mention here, I don't think that's exactly what this the Tibetan is saying here. Anne Klein, in her translation, translates it, hence it is established that Nagarjuna has unmistaken ascertainment of the definitive scriptures. Not that that this is a definite prophecy. That's not what it's saying. The Tibetan says, Dechir dila ngedong gilung chinji malokpar ngepar yopa drupo. So I think Anne has nailed it more precisely here. Jimpa is saying that this is talking about a definite or undistorted prophecy of Nagarjuna. At any rate, one can say that this citation establishes that Nagarjuna had unmistaken ascertainment of the definitive scriptures, because in order to attain the first ground, as they both say, you have to have that undistorted understanding. Then the text continues. The text called Manjushri's Root Realizations Tantra also gives the time of Nagarjuna's coming, and his name is found in the preceding sutra. So I'm not sure where Jimpa came up with this name, Manjushri's Root Realization Tantra. This is what's called the Manjushri Mula Tantra. That's what Jimpa is referring to it, Mula Tantra. But in Tibetan, it's called Jampel Gisawe Tokpa Le Kyang. So Tokpa is here, what do we call? Kalpa. So this is usually called the Manjushri Mula Kalpa. Paul, you know about this Tantra?
Yeah, the Manjushri Mula Kalpa is it's an action tantra, but it's what it is. It's the kalpa. I think he's taking dokpa as realization instead of as kalpa as ritual manual. So
right. So many of the sadhanas that we do in their Tibetan version, they'll have the word tokpa in it. It kind of means a manual or elaboration of words. It's not talking about the word realization, which is spelled differently in Tibetan. It has a sa suffix at the end. So at any rate, this is a famous text that was actually translated by the 84,000 project. So you can actually download that. Just to mention here, the kalpa often means manual, similar to but different than a sadhana. So I think I'll have some quotation from the 84,000 in a moment. So anyway, the Manjushri Root Tantra Manual, you might say, also gives the time of Nagarjuna's coming, and his name is found in the preceding sutra. There, in that Manjushri Mula Tantra Kalpa, it says that he will live 600 years so here I quoted from the 84,000. If you go to their website, you can actually find the root manual of the Rite of Manjushri. That's how they translated it, the Arya Manjushri Mula Kalpa. And in chapter 53, you'd have to search for it a while to find this prophecy. So it comes in chapter 53, starting verse 449. It says, when 400 years have passed after my parinirvana, a monk by the name of Nagarjuna, they added the Juna part. It says Gelong Lu, so that would mean the bhikshu, Naga, will delight in this beneficial teaching. He will attain the joyful stage, that's the name of the first bhumi, and will live 600 years. Then the next verse says, this great person will accomplish the Vidya or Rigpa called Mayuri, that is this special right. So I think that comes, does that come in Jimpa's? No, I don't think he mentions that. So this is giving more detail from that quotation in the Manjushri Mula Tantra. This great person will accomplish the Vidya, that means sort of like knowledge mantra, or Rigpa, called Mayuri, that's the name of a deity. He will know the meaning of various treatises down to every word. In Anne's translation of that, she doesn't have that. This statement about down to every word comes in the Sanskrit fragments of that the translators of the 84,000 used, and will understand that in reality there is no independent or inherent existence. When he leaves his body, he will be born in Sukhavati, and in due course will certainly attain Buddhahood. So that's the prophecy that's being referred to here. And interesting to me at least, the following stanza is prophecy about a Sangha. In fact, the previous stanza to the one we just read was a prophecy of Matreta. But this one, it says, right after that verse, it says, then there will be a monk by the name of a Sangha who will understand the true meaning of the treatises. He will clearly discern many times over the direct and indirect meanings of the sutras. He will educate people dedicated to the task. He will educate people, dedicated to the task and well-disciplined. He will accomplish the Vidya called Saluduti. So he makes a prophecy about a Sangha also having some kind of special realization of a knowledge mantra. With his superior intellect developed by the power of the Vidya mantra, he will distill the true meaning of the sutras, ensuring a long survival of the teachings. He will live 150 years, and when he leaves his body, he will be born in the God realms, the Deva realms. During his lengthy peregrination through samsara, transmigration through samsara, he will experience happiness for a long time, and in due course, this great being will attain awakening. There will be thus during that period many different types of monks who follow my teachings, including those who possess insight and are disciplined in the Dharma. So referring to at least these two prophecies of Nagarjuna and Asanga were the great sort of openers of the path of the Mahayana. Okay, so Jimpa simply says the Manjushri's root realization tantra also gives the time of Nagarjuna's coming, and his name is found in the preceding sutra. There it is stated that he will live 600 years. So in notes in Anne's book, she explains about this. This quotation of the Manjushri Mula Kalpa Tantra is not mentioned in Chandrakirti, in the Bhasham. This is something that Lama Tsongkhapa added, and he refers to it in other places also. I think Chandrakirti refers to it in other texts. The prophecy of the Great Drum Sutra is said to refer to the final appearance in the south of Nagarjuna. So it's said that Nagarjuna had three particular cycles of his teaching. He taught the first time at Nalanda. Later, another time he went to the northern continent and taught and received some of the sutras, including the Great Drum Sutra. And then third appearance, this is referring to the third appearance in South India, 400 years of his second appearance in South India. So in the Great Drum Sutra, it is stated that this Laichidi youth Loka Priyadarshana, or Sarva Loka, will be a monk bearing the name of a teacher and will propagate the teaching when it comes to decline 80 years after the Buddha's death. He will pass away after 100 years and will take birth in Sukhavati. So Anne takes this way. This great drums citation is not mentioned in the Madhyamakavatara Bhashyam. One, that after the teacher's passing away, when the average lifespan is 80 years, Jimpa says he will become a monk bearing the name of a teacher and will propagate the teaching when it comes to decline 80 years after the Buddha's death. So that apparently is not the correct interpretation. That's Jimpa's taking literally the Tibetan. Anne Klein says that lo gyachu dusu, which could mean when 80 years old or after 80 years. However, Jamyang Shepa's great exposition of the middle way makes it clear that the reference is to lifespan, when the average lifespan is 80 years. And the teaching of the Mahayana has degenerated that like Shiva youth, liked when seen by all the world, having become a monk bearing the teacher's name, in the sense of being of the Shakya clan, will disseminate the teaching, and that after 100 years he will die and be reborn in the blissful Pure Land, Sukhavati. So you can find that in Anne Klein's book on page 154. It's also quoted in Rigved Gyatso, the text that some of you may have, that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote as a word commentary to the Prasana Pada, the clearly worded, that we like to joke about before, that didn't seem so clearly worded. The prophecy in the Great Drum Sutra is said to refer to the final appearance in the south. Therefore, Nagarjuna's coming at 400 years refers to his second appearance in South India. So there were two appearances, one in the northern continent, also making 3 times. This prophecy is also accepted by the elder Bodhibhadra, who is a great monk, and the great Atisha. It is accepted by them to be a prophecy of the master Nagarjuna and is premised on the account of the Lichivi Sarva Priya Darshana or Sara Loka Priya Darshana sharing the same mental continuum with Nagarjuna. In the Great Drum Sutra, the monk is stated to be of the 7th ground. However, this statement and those cited above cannot be taken as contradicting one another. One of the statements said that he was of the 1st ground, and here it says in the Great Drum Sutra quotation, it says he's of the 7th ground. So you shouldn't think that this is contradicting the earlier citation. For example, some scriptures describe some of the guardian kings as stream enterers, while others describe them as Buddhas. So one finds a lot of variation, a lot of variations in the scriptures. That's how Jimpa translates it. And says in some scriptures, for instance, a certain great kings are said to be stream enterers, whereas in other scriptures, they are said to be Buddhas. So just to reiterate that, if you go to the group page, the Facebook group page, there's another PDF that Doris kindly put up for me. The realms of the 6 desire realm gods. And so remember, we talked about the 4 heavenly kings, or the 4 guardians of the directions. Here is talking about these kings. That was on the realm within the desire realm, still on the slopes of Mount Meru, above the Asuras who are below them. Above them is the heaven of 33, which is at the summit of Mount Meru, where Indra presides, where Buddha came to teach his mother, who had been born there during a rainy season. And there's one of the Buddhist holidays is the descent from the heaven of 33. Above that is the free from conflict, which is the realm where the fourth Bhumi Bodhisattvas have the karma to be reborn. Above that is the Tushita, where the fifth Bhumi Bodhisattvas have a fruitional rebirth ability. And in the sixth realm, on the sixth ground, the Bodhisattvas have the karma to have the fruitional rebirth as a king of the gods enjoying emanations, which is the fifth of those desire realm gods. So the what was it called? Free of conflict is in the clouds above Mount Meru. Tushita is above that. Enjoying emanations is above that. And then the sixth one, controlling others' emanations, is the highest of the desire realm gods. So if you'd like to know more about their lifespans and other factors about them, I mentioned a little bit in our discussion group, you can download that PDF. So Anne quotes here in her notes on page 265 in her text, note 45. Here Tsongkhapa answers another objection of accepting the Great Drum Sutra as a valid prophecy of Nagarjuna. This being because it says that Nagarjuna is a seventh ground bodhisattva. That's what is talked about here, right? Whereas other prophecies said that he was first ground. Whereas the descent into the Lanka Sutra indicates that it will become a first ground bodhisattva in that lifetime by cryptically saying variations among the sutras do occur. That's what the Tibetan text says in Gompa Rabso. Tsongkhapa dismisses the objection. So what does that mean? There are variations. That means like sometimes it says this, sometimes it says that, and so you just have to accept it. Tsongkhapa dismisses the objection. Jamyang Shepa expands on the answer in his great exposition of tenets and the great exposition of the middle way, which Paul must be out looking at the pages of now, by showing that Tsongkhapa's meaning is not that a variety of incompatible expositions are to be found in a sutra, but that variations understandable as fitting into a coherent picture are often found in sutra. After much creative construction, consideration of sources, Jamyang Shepa concludes that the various prophecies and descriptions fit together well if, from the sutra point of view, Nagarjuna is considered to be a seventh ground bodhisattva who assumed the manner of an ordinary common being who newly attained the first ground in that lifetime. So we talked a little bit about this last time. So it's not saying that they're just like random, the various kind of prophecies that are kind of contradictory and you just have to accept it. That's just variations, but they all fit into a picture that he was actually a seventh ground bodhisattva who took the aspect of being a first ground bodhisattva for the sake of people. From this perspective, the explanation given even by the Indian scholar Avalokiteshvara that Nagarjuna attained the first ground as well as the prophecies of the same in the Descent into Lanka Sutra and the Manjushri Root Tantra are interpreted as according merely with the common appearance and not actual fact. This interpretation is based on the Great Drum Sutra itself, where it says, having seen him in the seventh ground, having set him in the seventh ground, I will bless him as an ordinary being indicating that although Nagarjuna was a seventh ground bodhisattva who attained the eighth ground in that lifetime, he appeared to be an ordinary being who attained the path of seeing, and thus the first ground in that lifetime. The seeming conflict in the scriptures is explained by adopting a double view of Nagarjuna, that is, as a higher being who put on a show, sort of like how do you say, when we say his intention was to educate others, and so took this aspect like that, put on a show of attaining a lower achievement for the sake of helping others. The situation is further complicated because in Tantra, as Tsongkhapa's Ocean of Reasoning explains, Nagarjuna is considered to have attained a Buddhahood in that very lifetime. Tsongkhapa refers to Chandrakirti's lamp illuminating the 5 stages, which is one of the tantric texts that Nagarjuna is supposedly, that Chandrakirti is said to have written, which says that Nagarjuna attained the status of a Vajradhara, a Buddha in the tantric sense, in that very lifetime through the path of highest yoga tantra. He compares this to Shakyamuni's display of enlightenment in the world system, even though Shakyamuni himself had actually attained enlightenment many eons earlier. Thus, in what is considered the final presentation, there's a triple view of Nagarjuna. He made a double display as a common being who attained the first bodhisattva ground, actually being a seventh ground bodhisattva who attained the eighth in that lifetime, whereas actually he attained Buddhahood by practicing highest yoga tantra. Make sense? No? Sean? Doesn't make any sense? So you may appear as a PhD. What is your PhD in? Or your master's? I can't remember. You have a PhD or master's?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Sean.
I did not get the PhD.
But you have a degree in what?
I have a bachelor in electrical engineering. I was getting a PhD in bioinformatics, but COVID kind of messed that up.
Right. So it's kind of like you taking the aspect of being Santa Claus to your daughter, being husband to your wife, taking different aspects to different people for different reasons. So who has David, you're back. Who has a problem with that? Anyone sort of perplexed? You can check in the notes in Anne Klein's book. Let's see, did I print that out? Okay, I didn't. There's a lengthy exposition that was put together with the help of Jeffrey Hopkins on putting all of these perspectives you can find in the notes in that chapter. Okay, so now we're going on to the next section, identifying those who are vessels for explaining the profound truth, or you can say who are receptacles for the teachings, right? Let me get on here. Or as Anne says, identification of those who are vessels for an explanation of profound emptiness. So that means who are the intended disciples that this that emptiness is being taught to in Chandrakirti's Madhyamakavatara Bhashyam. Who are the intended disciples? So Jimpa's text says, as for the definitive treatises, they should also be taught to not just anyone, right? You shouldn't go down to your local Wendy's or McDonald's or whatever and be teaching the definitive sutras. So what are the definitive treatises? That means those texts that teach the definitive meaning, which is emptiness. All other teachings that the Buddha gave are called interpretable. That means even teachings about things that are true, like karma and death and rebirth and so forth, the Four Noble Truths, they are called interpretable because they are not talking about just emptiness itself. This topic will come up again later. There's a great text written on discriminating the interpretable from the definitive sutras. As for the definitive treatises, those that are teaching emptiness, they should not be taught they should be taught to not just anyone, but to those who, because of past habituation, have planted the seed for realizing emptiness. That means in previous lives, or maybe previously in this life, they had habituated in the teachings, they had become familiar with the teachings, and by so doing, planted the seed for realizing emptiness. Hopefully that's what we're doing now. Even if we don't realize emptiness this lifetime, which I hope all of you will to some degree, have a realization of emptiness, we're planting the seed that in future lifetimes, when little Diana comes out of mama's womb, or maybe she's born in a Pure Land, she doesn't need the womb, that she will have this imprint in her mind to be able to realize emptiness very easily. So others, even other people other than those who've had the imprint in their mind from past lives, even if they listen to the treatises that present emptiness, will suffer grave, injurious consequences because they are plagued with distorted understandings regarding emptiness. Let me read a little how Anne translates it, a slightly different phrasing. Furthermore, Nagarjuna's treatise on the definitive meaning, that is emptiness, should not be taught just to those who, though through prior cultivation, have established seeds in their mental continuums or continua for the realization of emptiness. It should not be taught to others. For even if they have heard texts that teach emptiness, they have thoughts wrongly oriented with respect to emptiness, and hence teaching to them is disastrous. To me, that's last phrase a little more clear. Rather than saying plagued with distorted understandings. Such grave, injurious consequences will transpire like this. Some being unlearned, having not heard much of the teachings, will forsake emptiness completely and depart to the lower realms. So when they're told about phenomena and the person as lacking inherent existence, they may misapprehend that, thinking that they don't exist at all, and being fed up and not believing that, they will create negative actions that lead them to the lower realms. Some will apprehend the meaning of emptiness of intrinsic existence in a distorted way, such as all these phenomena are utterly non-existent. They do not exist at all. They will thus apprehend it mistakenly, and the wrong view disparaging all phenomena of causes and effects will be first engendered and held to be and held onto, and the wrong view disparaging all phenomena of causes and effects, that they're just non-existent, will be first engendered and held onto, will come to increase further and further. Again, David, did you, I just missed, did you have a question or you just made a statement? Okay. Anne says, others erroneously apprehending the meaning of emptiness, which is the non-establishment of an inherent existence, proving that inherent existence doesn't exist, think that these phenomena, due to lacking inherent existence, simply do not exist or are non-existent. First, they generate the wrong view, deprecating all things, causes and effects, and then, since they do not give up this view, and do not give it up, this view increases more and more. So then there is a quotation from Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom, the treatise on Mula Prajna, Fundamental Wisdom. And this is verse 24, chapter 24, verse 11. And it says, emptiness viewed mistakenly dooms those of weak intelligence, like a snake wrongly held or a spell wrongly incanted. Incanted? Incanted. What does that mean? Anyone have an idea?
Incantation, Venerable George?
Yeah, it's talking about incantation. Well, I mean, the incantation means when you're chanting something, right? So emptiness viewed mistakenly dooms those of weak intelligence like a snake wrongly held or a spell wrongly incanted. Incanted, like incantation. So emptiness viewed mistakenly. So if you misunderstand emptiness, what it means, that's a bad thing for those of weak intelligence. Like holding a snake wrongly, that means, grabbing it by the middle or the tail. Why is that wrong? Because the snake's head may, if you don't grab it right behind the head may come out and bite you, right? Or a spell, a mantra wrongly chanted or incanted. And translates this, those of little wisdom are harmed when their view of emptiness is faulty, just as harm comes to those who faultily hold a snake or faultily use a knowledge mantra. So in doing so, it's said that certain kinds of spells or knowledge mantras like this, if chanted incorrectly, can bring harm to the person who's using them. Jimpa's text says, John Paul, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I can you hear me?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, yeah. I think that's a reference. There's a famous story in Sanskrit literature of some rishi who decided that he wanted to kill one of the gods. And so he conjured up a deity whose name was, like, I think it was Indra, like the one who kills Indra. But he mispronounced the Sanskrit and pronounced it as Indra, who is the one who will kill me. And so when he mispronounced it, the wrong deity showed up and killed him.
Okay, I didn't know that story. Yeah, so that could very well be what's one of the kinds of references that's being referred to here. Thank you for that. So Jimpa continues in his translation of Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa, after quoting this stanza from Nagarjuna. So it's Jimpa doesn't show in his notes. He quotes this is from Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom, but he doesn't quote it right in the text. Lama Tsongkhapa says he says that to not fall into the extreme of disparaging conventional truth, what does that mean? Disparaging conventional truth. That means, cause and effect doesn't have any, is not, doesn't exist. There are no future lives, and so forth and so on. He says that to not fall into the extreme of disparaging conventional truth, one must not slight the reflection-like karma and its effects. Karma and its effects, karma and its results. Usually we say karma is the cause. The results are which are accrued as a result of that are the karmic effects, right? They're reflection-like. They're empty of inherent existence. One must not slight, one should not deprecate the reflection-like karma and its effects, and to not fall into the extreme of reifying ultimate truth. Reifying means adding something which is not there, saying that ultimate truth is not just a mere negation, and to not fall into the extreme of reifying ultimate truth, one must see karma and its effects only in things with no intrinsic existence. So again, I prefer Anne's translation here. She's pointing out that it's furthermore, Chandrakirti's, I guess she says, deprecating cause and effects, then they will not give up the view, increases more and more. Maybe she misses in her own translation that phrase there. To be contrary to these two is described as falling into the extremes of eternalism and nihilism. Thus, Chandrakirti has stated that were one to conceive conditioned things as non-existent, utterly non-existent, having heard about emptiness and understanding it wrongly. If you were to conceive conditioned things as non-existent, this would constitute a wrong view. Now, there may be a linguistic level of difference between non-existent and not being existent, but insofar as conveying the sense of non-existence is concerned, no matter how carefully one might analyze, no difference whatsoever can be found between these two words. So what's that referring to? Anne's translation says, furthermore, Chandrakirti's clear words, the Prasanapada, commenting on this verse that we just said from the Fundamental Wisdom about the snake and the spells wrongly chanted. It says that in order not to fall into the extreme of deprecating conventionalities, how did Jimpa say yeah, he said earlier, deprecating some other kind of way. In order not to fall into the extreme of deprecating conventionalities, it is necessary not to undermine the validity of nominally existent actions and their effects, which are like reflections. So the nominally existent, merely imputedly existent phenomena, you should not deprecate them. Say, for instance, Ron exists conventionally. If we were to misunderstand emptiness or selflessness, that there is no self of Ron, that would be a deprecation. That would be a deprecating, inferring that actually things that do exist don't exist. So in order not to fall into the extreme of deprecating conventionalities, it is necessary not to undermine the validity of nominally existent actions and their effects, which are like reflections, and in order not to fall into the extreme of superimposing or reifying ultimate existence onto phenomena, which only nominally exist it is necessary to see that actions and their effects pertain only to things that lack inherent existence. Thus, Chandrakirti has stated that were one to conceive conditioned things as non-existent, this would constitute a wrong view. And so I read that already in talking about the difference between existent, non-existent, and not being existent. What is that talking about? And makes it more clear here. Chandrakirti says that one who considers compositional phenomena to be non-existent has a wrong view. Hence, even though there is a verbal difference between something being not existent, mepa, and not being existent, yopa mayimpa in Tibetan, the appearance to the mind of the aspect of non-existent, mepa, does not differ at all from the appearance to the mind of the aspect of not being existent, yopa mayimpa, even though one looks into it in detail. So you can go into the note there that she has on that on note 54, where she goes into more detail about that. Okay, how are we doing? Making sense, Stephen? Everything's crystal clear, right?
Well, I think I have to read note 54, Venerable George.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, that might help a little bit. KT, how are we doing? How are you doing?
Hanging in there.
Hanging in there?
I have to read note 54 too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I see what they're saying, not being existent and not existent.
Right.
Like it doesn't exist at all. Like it's versus we're studying emptiness and we have that version of not being existent.
So I think the gist of note 54 is talking about some individuals, some Tibetans in particular, were saying that phenomena could be, certain things were non-existent, but that they were still not, it says not being existent, that they are not being existent. Let me just read that, a little bit of that note for you here. So that's on page 266 of Anne's book. So it says, the reason I was hesitant to read it originally is because I have to change glasses to read this smaller print in the book. So 54 says, Tsongkhapa is saying that to hold that something does not exist and that it is not existent amount to the same thing. The verbal difference does not yield a difference in meaning. Therefore, one cannot hold that something is not existent and it is not non-existent. He makes a similar point in his middling exposition of special insight. I think that refers to the middling Lan Rim section on special insight, which is phrased a little bit differently than in the Lan Rim Chemo exposition of special insight. That means the wisdom chapter, right? So there's a wisdom chapter in Lan Rim Chemo. There's a wisdom chapter in the middling Lan Rim, and they're very compatible. Lama, I think Jeffrey Hopkins' translation, what is it, Final Exposition of Wisdom, has a translation of the middling special insight section. So anyway, here it says, differentiating between the two, quote, is not existent, and end quote, and quote, does not exist, unquote, and between the two is not non-existent and exists. In order to propound that an object is not existent, is not non-existent, is not both, and is not neither, with respect to a base such as an object, is exhausted as merely a difference in the mode of expression. No matter how much one analyzes how the meanings appear to the mind, there is no difference at all. Hence, to propound that one falls or does not fall into an extreme through how these words are used is exhausted as an unfounded fixation on mere words. Okay. Mikhail, what do you think?
Thank you, very much. I have a question about the Nagarjuna stanza we just read. It is said, emptiness viewed mistakenly, and is that referring to both extremes or only to the nihilism?
So let me go back to Anne's translation. She translates that same verse. Those of little wisdom are harmed when their view of emptiness is faulty. So I think this is referring to both, because she says after that, just as harm comes to those who faultily hold a snake or faultily use a knowledge mantra. So I think this is referring to both when it is held as, to be, when you hold it to be inherent, hold phenomena not to exist at all, or to superimpose upon inherent existence an existence of its own, that inherent existence does exist. I think it refers to both.
Thank you.
Okay. So how are we doing? William? I can see the top of your head. Are you still investigating elephants? Or are you following along? You following along with what we're saying? As difficult as it might be.
Elephants, George. Elephants.
You're still thinking of elephants. Okay. That's good enough. Okay. So Nadine, Stephen, any questions? Diana? Okay. Nadine, you're okay? Yeah, okay. So continuing. Also in Jimba's text, he says, also in commenting on the following lines from the 400 stanzas. So this is Arya Davis 400, sometimes called the 400 stanzas on yogic activity of bodhisattvas. There's a good translation of that available. So the stanza that's being quoted says, one goes to the lower realms alone. Those not ordinary go to peace alone. Or as Anne says, the one goes just to a bad migration upon rebirth, whereas the non-ordinary goes to peace. So this is quoting, this is just part of a stanza in the Arya Davis 400 stanzas. And then and quotes the following statement that Jimpa says, Chandrakirti explains that some who are not sublime and listen to the teachings on selflessness only end up going to the lower realms because of a tendency to either dismiss emptiness, thinking that's ridiculous, that things don't exist at all, or gain distorted understanding of it. In Anne's text, it's clear that it's in Chandrakirti's commentary to the 400 stanzas. Remember, Chandrakirti wrote several commentaries. He wrote his own commentary to his own Karikas, the Madhyamaka Bhashyam. He wrote a commentary to Fundamental Wisdom word commentary called the Prasanapada. He wrote a commentary to the 400 stanzas of yogic activity. And what was the other commentary? Paul, do you remember?
Commentary on 60 stanzas on reasoning.
Right. Those are generally the four big commentaries that he wrote. So she points it out that in his commentary on Aryadeva's 400 stanzas, he says, on hearing the teachings on selflessness, the unwise abandon it or realize it incorrectly, whereby they go just to a bad migration upon rebirth. Okay. So Jimpa's translation continues, thus both these responses are described as leading to the lower realms. Or as Anne says, thus Chandrakirti explains that both those who abandon the teachings on emptiness or those who realize it incorrectly go to a bad transmigration after rebirth. Then he has in quotations, to gain a distorted understanding is to apprehend the meaning of emptiness in nihilistic terms as non-existence. And says to realize emptiness erroneously is to apprehend the meaning of emptiness as signifying non-existence. So my earlier statement about that it could be either, I think is wrong. To realize emptiness erroneously in this case means to apprehend the meaning of emptiness as signifying non-existence. Therefore, when prideful persons, I'm reading Anne, who lack the mental capacity to discriminate the very subtle meaning of emptiness, and yet who fancy that they have such capacity, they have that inflated kind of pride, they develop a strong facsimile of belief in the mere words of the profound meaning. They don't actually have belief in the mere words of profound meaning. They have a facsimile of belief in the words of the profound meaning, which actually is unsuited to their faculties. This leads to disaster. Consequently, you should take care regarding these points. So Jimpa translates that this way. Thus, regarding individuals who lack the power of intelligence to appreciate the extremely subtle points, yet possess evident conceit of having such ability, if they engage with fervor in their false determinations of the mere words related to the profound truth that lies clearly beyond their capacity, beyond their ken. I threw that in for those who went to see the Barbie movie, Beyond Their Ken. Anyway, has anyone seen the Barbie movie, by the way? KT, have you seen it? Oh, okay. Oh, Stephen, you went to see it, right? Okay.
I've seen it 3 times.
You went to the theater, or is it already on DVD or something?
No, it's in the theaters, but different people are asking to go, and so I just kept going.
Okay.
It's pretty good.
Does anyone not know? Is there anyone here who does not know what we're talking about? The Barbie movie? Ken was her boyfriend, right? Okay.
Can I offer one more point on the Barbie movie? The really quick
Okay,
one.
no,
It
yeah,
relates
quick.
sort of. But Greta Gerwig, the director, she was influenced by the story of the Buddha Shakyamuni, and it's embedded in the story. And if you watch it and look for that, you'll see some things.
Allusions to the story of Buddha?
Yeah.
Is that right?
all over
Okay,
the
well, that's
place.
good to know. Okay,
Throughout
so
the movie.
so you can go to the movie with some, forgiveness, thinking that I'm going to see some references to the story of the Buddha. Doris, you should tell your brother-in-law about that. Okay.
You can rent it on Amazon Prime.
Oh, you can. I didn't know that was already rentable. Okay. So Jimpa said, thus, regarding individuals who lack the power of intelligence to appreciate the extremely subtle points, they don't have the intelligence to see the subtle points, yet they have this kind of conceit that they've got it, right? If they engage with energy, with fervor in their false determinations of the mere words related to the profound truth that lies clearly beyond their capacity, beyond their ken, this will bring grave injurious consequences, because they really don't understand emptiness. Therefore, we need to be especially careful with matters such as these. Then a new question comes up, or qualm. One may ask, it seems to be difficult, therefore, to determine who is appropriate to teach emptiness to, who is an appropriate vessel or receptacle or disciple that's suited for emptiness, and who is not appropriate to teach. Seems to be difficult to determine that. So how does one make such a determination? To indicate that this can be made on the basis of external signs, Lama Tsongkhapa's text, Lama Tsongkhapa says, so he's quoting the next two karikas of the Majjhimavatara. Even ordinary persons, when hearing about emptiness, sheer joy surges again and again within their hearts. Even ordinary persons, when hearing about emptiness, maybe there should be another particle in there. If within ordinary beings, when hearing about emptiness, sheer joy surges again and again within their heart, tears born of such joy fill their eyes, and their hairs stand up in their follicles. It's like if you get frightened, your hairs stand on end, right? Does anyone experience that? Also, when you feel extreme joy, your mind is incredibly joyful. Tears of joy emerge from your eyes. I think that sometimes happens to us. Anyone, does that sound familiar to you? Do you sometimes have tears of joy? Such people have the seed of perfect Buddhahood. They are the perfect vessels for this teaching. To them, you should teach the sublime ultimate truth. Or as Anne translates it, even when an ordinary being, she has even while an ordinary being, on hearing about emptiness, inner joy arises again and again. Tears arising from this happiness moisten their eyes, and the hairs of their body stand on end. Such persons have the seed of the awareness of a perfect Buddha. They are vessels for the teaching of suchness. The ultimate truth is to be taught to them. So these are external signs. It's said also, for instance, one can discern certain things about bodhisattvas by seeing external signs. If in hearing about emptiness, tears arise in them, one has an indication that they have this great appreciation of emptiness, in the same way that you can determine certain things by external signs, such as in the desert, if you see birds flying in a circle around an area in the future, you've been searching for water for a long time, one can use that as a sign to ascertain that that may be an oasis where there is water and so forth and so on. Some examples like that. So Jimpa says, even ordinary persons on the beginner stage, when hearing an undistorted discourse about emptiness, sheer joy surges again and again within their hearts because of hearing such a discourse. Tears born of such joy fill their eyes, and their hair stands up in their follicles. And they stand on end. Such people have what is called the seed of realizing emptiness, the seed of the non-conceptual gnosis of perfect Buddhahood. It is people such as these who are perfect vessels for this teaching by a well-versed master. So to them, you should teach the sublime ultimate truth, the truth whose characteristics will be explained below. So this is the ideal disciple. How did they get to that point where they would, tears would come to their eyes, they'd feel joy, their hairs would stand on end? From having heard about emptiness in the past, thought about it, recognized the liberating qualities of that or maybe having had some little experience in meditation, even if they didn't realize emptiness of the person directly, having meditated on that and felt all of the things that I have done, that I feel guilty about or that I feel proud about. It's just an illusion because there is no self to feel guilty about. There is no self that has actually attained these qualities. So one can feel incredibly liberated from all of the kinds of distorted states of mind that cause misery in our lives. That kind of person who's had some kind of experience like that in the past, even if they didn't realize emptiness directly, leaves a very strong imprint in the mind that when they hear about emptiness again in the future, even a few lines, incredible joy rises, or that emptiness is going to be explained. There's a great eagerness to hear that and understand that and listen attentively and so forth. Making sense? Mary Ellen? Yeah. Have you had any experiences like that of great joy of hearing about emptiness? Not yet? Okay. Ron?
And when I got a tax refund.
You had tears of joy. Okay, I see. I thought it was about emptiness. Okay. Anyone, just out of curiosity, anyone have any kind of experiences like that strong appreciation of the teachings about emptiness? Or Nadine, anything like that?
Yes, reading the sutras, or when the Maitreya relic tour was tears came to my eyes and to meet the relics. But it's not about emptiness, but I can relate to these.
Right. It can be because of previous, appreciation of the Dharma like that. Okay, so Jimpa's text continues. The point here is that if one sees these physical signs emerge on the basis of two convergent facts. One, that the person hears the discourse on emptiness and that he understands what is being heard. I guess those are two. Then such signs indicate unmistakably that the person is a suitable vessel. In contrast, if the person does not understand the meaning, or even if that person does understand the meaning, if the signs do not arise, one cannot determine for the time being that person is a suitable vessel for the profound truth. Even so, if the person adheres to the dictates of their sublime teachers, their suggestions, teachings, advices of their guru, such a person may in the future become a suitable vessel to deposit numerous new potencies for realizing emptiness. Let me read how Anne translates that. If these physical marks are seen to arise when a person has the composite, how did Jimpa say, two convergent facts, the composite of having heard non-erroneous discourse on emptiness and not having misunderstood it. So they've heard it and they haven't misunderstood it. Jimpa had said the second one was what? Oops. The person hears the discourse on emptiness and that he understands it. And I think more correctly says, not having misunderstood it. Jimpa says has understood it, right? For those of you who don't like double negatives, Jimpa sounds better, but the Tibetan has that double negative, has not misunderstood it. This is an unambiguous sign. You know, if they have the tears coming to their eyes, their hair stand on end. If the meaning is not understood, or if understood, these marks do not arise, one cannot determine that such persons are vessels, receptacles for the profound for the time being. Still, if they will not depart from what is set out by the excellent Lama, their guru, that is, will not merely follow their own conjecture, they are suitable vessels for newly infusing many potencies that will serve as a causal lineage for developing realization of emptiness. Mary Ellen, what do you think?
I'm wondering if that means that when they hear it, when it says they understand, could it be referring to not understanding the meaning, but understanding that what they're hearing is critical, what they're hearing is important? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it means that they understand the meaning of, they have not misunderstood the meaning of emptiness. It doesn't mean that they've developed a deep realization, an understanding in that way, but they haven't misunderstood it. I don't think it's referring to what you're thinking. Anyone else have a thought about that? So, Miss iPhone, maybe you're remaining anonymous again. That's good. Any thoughts? You're welcome to chime in. Okay. So Jimba's text says, so to them, you should teach the sublime ultimate truth, the truth whose characteristics will be explained below. So this is always a difficult question. Say, for instance, amongst the Bodhisattva vows, there is a vow not to teach emptiness to those who are not a proper vessel, right? So in this degenerate time, it's said that one has to err on the side of explaining these things, even if people are not perfect vessels, leaving an imprint in their mind, especially when it is explained non-erroneously in the case of when the Dalai Lama teaches or when Lama Zopa Rinpoche teaches and so forth. Oops. Okay. So, Rachel, you just came back on. Did you have a thought? Did you have a question? No. Okay. So we're going to go on to the next section here. Maybe think a little bit about this, about these factors, having deposited imprints in the past from hearing about emptiness and developing some kind of experience in the past leaves an incredible imprint in your mind that in the future you could be recognized easily by the teachers as a suitable recipient of the teachings. They'll even go out of their way to give you special lectures on it. So to try to put these teachings into practice now, to try to have some experience about emptiness, so that we'll be in that situation in the future. So the next section in Jimba's text is titled, "The Way Higher Qualities Ensue If Suchness is Expounded," or and says, "How good qualities arise when the profound emptiness is explained to proper vessels." So you understand the idea of vessel, right? When you have a vessel, it's something you pour something into, like an inferior vessel. We've talked about this before. There's an expression in India that a unbaked clay pot is not a suitable vessel to pour lion's milk. Have you heard that, Paul? So somehow, maybe, I'm not sure what it is about lion's milk. Obviously, the female lion, right? Whether it's acidic or whether it's heavier than ordinary things or why, but if you pour that into an unbaked pot, not a suitable vessel, it will crack. So that's used as an example. So we should be baked. We should have our understanding well baked in. Okay, so this next section, "The way higher qualities ensue if suchness is expounded. For them, the ensuing qualities will come to birth." So this is quoting the last line of the Karika that we talked about before, when we talked about even ordinary persons, when hearing about emptiness and so forth, that ended with, "To them you should teach the sublime ultimate truth." That went up to the third line of the fifth verse. So now it's the last line of that verse says, "For them," these people who are suitable vessels, "the ensuing qualities will come to birth." And then the next Karika says, "Adopting perfect morality, they will always abide by it." Okay, so these perfect vessels, having heard about emptiness, now understanding emptiness, they will always abide in perfect morality. So one thing that comes to mind is when Lama Zopa Rinpoche was teaching in McLeodganj at Tushita, at one point he was always seated at this window at the front. I don't know if it looks the same. Rachel, you'll know the Tushita better than I do now. There was an open window in the front. The teacher would teach that, and all the students would be facing that. There was a sort of like a big stand there that had been, and when it was being cleaned out, the students who were cleaning it out found all these scriptures, and Lama Zopa, realizing that he'd been sitting on top of these scriptures, not physically touching the scriptures, but they were in the box below, and realizing the import of karma. When one has an insight into emptiness, one is very, very careful about the karma one creates. It's not as though you are now beyond karma, simply having an insight into emptiness. You realize that because phenomena are empty, but the law of cause and effect, dependent origination, is infallible, that karmic results will follow from even small negative actions, and of course from positive actions. So for them, the ensuing qualities will come to birth. Adopting perfect morality, they will always abide by it. They'll always be careful not to create breaches of karmic, the vows that they've taken, and not to create negative karma. They will practice generosity and cultivate compassion. So understanding emptiness, they understand that generosity is a necessary factor. Let's say that it is, although it is empty of inherent existence, it will definitely bring its results. So they will go out of their way to practice that. These are the signs of the actual, practice of the Bodhisattva's deeds, right? and they will cultivate compassion. They will practice forbearance. They'll practice patience. The next, the third perfection, and they will dedicate thoroughly their virtue to freedom for all beings. So that implies also they will dedicate it within the emptiness of the three spheres. They will revere those who aspire to perfect awakening. That's the first line of verse 7. They will revere those who aspire to perfect awakening. Or as Anne translates those, having adopted ethics, they always abide in ethics. They give gifts, sustain compassion, meditate on patience, and fully dedicate the virtue of those toward enlightenment for the sake of releasing transmigrating beings. They respect the perfect bodhisattvas. So as Chimpa's translation continues, teaching emptiness to the vessels described above will not be fruitless. Why? Well, they have a chance of realizing emptiness, but not only will such listeners not be saddled with injurious consequences of distorted apprehension of emptiness, for them, the ensuing qualities that result from listening to the view of emptiness will come to birth. How do these come about? These suitable vessels will relate to hearing the view of emptiness like finding a treasure, so that this view does not degenerate in other lives. Adopting perfect morality, they will always abide by it. So here's another factor. Knowing that their view of emptiness is so precious, so valuable, so that it not degenerate in the future, they want to be reborn as a human in the future lives, maybe to hear the teachings again. So they'll be very careful about their practice of morality. Adopting perfect morality, they will always abide by it. They will do so by reflecting, if due to moral degeneration, I were to fall into the lower realms, the continuity of the view of emptiness will be broken. Why is this? Well, you have an imprint in the mind, but because you're not cultivating it in successive lives, that imprint is becoming less and less prominent. It will still possibly lead you to teachings again in the future, but you won't be you may not be to the point where your eyes will moisten when you hear about emptiness and so forth, because you may be in the lower realms for eons and eons and eons. Thus, they will adopt moral discipline and guard it without degeneration. Becoming morally degenerate does not require first adopting a moral code, even committing those acts that are naturally reprehensible, the kandamatua, the natural negative actions, which are contrary to virtue, constitute moral degeneration. It doesn't mean that you have to have the pratimoksha vows or bodhisattva vows that you break. It just means even creating negative karma. One tries to avoid creating negative karma. They will further reflect, even if, because of observing morality, I am born in the higher realms, I may become poor and bereft of the conditions for sustenance. I may not have resources, I may not have enough food to live, I may have a roof over my head and so forth, such as food, drink, medicine, and clothing, and devoted to seeking these, the continuity of my hearing the view of emptiness and meditating on its meaning will be broken. So if you have to spend all your time in earning a living, finding food and so forth, you'll have no time to listen to the Dharma. That's the case with many people, isn't it? Or maybe in their own view, they need to have more before they listen to the Dharma. I think I told you many times in Singapore, I would joke to the people that they were always talking about country club, credit card, car. I think they were What was the fourth C? Does anyone know? There was a fourth thing that everyone had to have.
Alpha.
Cell phone, maybe a cell phone. There. So you don't need those things in order to listen to the Dharma. Thus, as explained before, they will practice generosity. Why? In order to create the causes of having what is needed in the future lives so that you can devote yourself to the Dharma. Where was it? Practice generosity in relation to the higher and lower fields. Higher fields means to the holy beings, your gurus, bodhisattvas, Buddhas, and so forth. Lower fields, ordinary beings. Reflecting, it is the view of emptiness sustained by great compassion that will lead to Buddhahood and not otherwise. So one can't achieve Buddhahood with emptiness alone. You need to have it conjoined with great compassion, or bodhicitta. They will cultivate the habit of great compassion, which is the root of bodhicitta and so forth. Further reflecting, through anger, one goes to the lower realms, destroys one's virtues, and acquires an extremely unappealing countenance. You'll be ugly. And because of these, the Aryas will not be pleased. They will practice patience. They will practice forbearance. Given that morality and so on are not that are not dedicated repeatedly to the omniscience of a Buddha, do not become causes for Buddhahood. If you don't dedicate your merits to the achievement of enlightenment, they don't become causes for Buddhahood, and that uninterrupted continuity of their fruits in the form of embodiments and material resources will fail to emerge. They dedicate thoroughly their virtue of morality and so on to the freedom from cyclic existence for all beings. And seeing that others like Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas cannot teach the profound dependent origination like bodhisattvas can, they will come to tremendously revere the bodhisattvas who aspire to perfect awakening. So that's where we're going to stop today. What do you think? Questions? Doubts?
We're doomed.
Say again?
We're doomed.
We're doomed. No, we're not doomed. You just have to apply yourself. William, what do you think?
I just wanted to comment that I moved on briefly from elephants, and you used the word several times, prophesized. I put that into Mr. Google, who asked me, who responded, do you mean prophesied? Not prophesized, but rather prophesied.
Okay.
So I don't know, because I was too busy crying to see clear.
Thank goodness.
Just as a point of information.
Also, the hairs below your eyes standing on end were preventing you from seeing well, I think.
I had the entire top of my head was standing up. It was really frightening. You can imagine.
That's good to hear. That's excellent.
You look like Don King over there.
Yeah. So there is a word to prophesize, right? To prophesize. So there may be some dictionaries that say some of the words that we say when we say non-conceptualizing or something like that. There's certain words that we use. We add prefaces and suffices to them that may not be found in the Oxford Dictionary or the dictionary that Google is referring to, but prophesized is something that is sometimes said, sometimes used. So what it means is that the Buddha made a prediction, right, in certain circumstances that something will come about in the future. It's like what did Jesus say? What did they say about the predictions of Jesus? Are they called prophecies or what? Does anyone know?
Yeah, George, I think it might be a difference between British and American English is what it is. I think in British English is prophesied, whereas I think American English is prophesize.
Okay.
But it's the past tense is prophesied, not prophesied.
Prophesied, prophesied. Let's leave that. Let's leave that for
Let's leave that.
investigation, grammatical investigation during the week. I take that as a good point. Thank you for pointing that out, William. Anyone else have a Dharma itch they need scratched? Rachel, you think you have something? You're thinking about it.
Just the last thing that you said, which was that the bodhisattvas can better explain emptiness, kind of got me back all the way to months ago, wondering how all of this fits in, and my mind isn't sharp enough right now to sort it out myself. But that last line where you were saying that the bodhisattvas could better explain emptiness,
Right.
caught me a little bit.
Right. And so superior to Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas. So there's something special about the bodhisattvas who have this accumulation of merit, have deeper insight with myriad numbers of reasonings that, say, for instance, you hear emptiness or selflessness explained by the Dalai Lama or by some Arya bodhisattvas would be more beneficial than listening it to even from learned Shravakas, Theravada teachers and so forth. So they will come to tremendously revere the bodhisattvas who aspire to perfect awakening. Nice point.
It's not that it's a different type of emptiness. It's just that they have the merit to do it differently.
Right. Well, so if we talk about from our understanding earlier that from the Prasangika point of view, Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas have to realize the emptiness of inherent existence. They have realized that. Whereas in the Theravada tradition, there is not that in the scriptural tradition of Theravada, the texts that they have in the Pali Canon, there is not a detailed explanation of the meaning of emptiness as is understood in the Prasangika. It's talking about something like the gross selflessness of persons. I think I quoted earlier in our text some quotations, translators of the Pali Canon who said one shouldn't think that this stanza, remember there was a stanza that Chandrakirti quoted that Lama Tsongkhapa expounded on from the Pali Canon or from the Hinayana scriptures that still exist. That form is like a mass of foam and so forth. Remember, that was said by Nagarjuna, and Chandrakirti quoted it also, to indicate that there are allusions to the subtle meaning of emptiness in the Hinayana scriptures, whereas in a translation of that in the present day, one of the Theravada bhikshus who translated that said, "You shouldn't think this is talking about the emptiness of the Mahayana. That's going too far." So there's reason to believe even today in the Theravada, those who haven't embraced, somehow amalgamated Mahayana teachings into their own understanding, that they couldn't explain the profound meaning of dependent origination, the meaning of emptiness, in the same way that bodhisattvas could. Okay, Diana, what do you think? Are you there? You can unmute by pressing the space bar, I think. There you go. Oh, you were there for a second.
You talking to me?
No, I'm talking to Diana,
Oh, okay.
who's attempted. She got it there for a second. You were unmuted for a second there.
You're still muted.
Okay. We can't hear you. You're not unmuted. There you go.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
In gross summary, I take this to mean that when we are handling a very sharp teaching, we have to be very careful not to misinterpret it. And the two things that have been especially flagged are, on the one hand, thinking nothing exists, and on another hand, thinking that this gets us out of obeying the guidance of morality. And I'm remembering places where I think I have seen this happen among people who have maybe heard some teachings, but not enough. And it's always easier to see mistakes in other people than oneself. So I'm not saying I don't do this, but I remember so many times I've seen a journalist describing that they'd identified themselves as having deep need of a deeper teaching to cope with life. And they looked at this and they looked at that and they looked at Buddhism, but of course they immediately saw that Buddhism said nothing exists. And since it's obvious that I exist, it's obvious that Buddhism is wrong. And it's scary. And then on the other hand, years ago when we had this tiny little no-name, beautiful Dharma class in like the early 1980s, and in somebody's loft, but then Allen Ginsberg was going to be showing up that night. And so all these people that we'd never seen before showed up, and my teacher asked me to kind of shepherd them. And one of them was saying with great enthusiasm how wonderful Buddhism was. And one of the best things was that there's no such thing as right and wrong.
Right.
And I said, there's some situations in which it's exceptionally difficult to know the right thing to do. But most of the time I know perfectly well. I'm just too lazy and self-involved to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's getting into the point of that one shouldn't deprecate the illusion-like or reflection-like law of cause and effect. Cause and effect does appear as an illusion, but it still functions. So that's one of the big pitfalls, in misunderstanding about emptiness and so forth. Okay, so let's end there. We'll have our discussion group on Monday. Those of you who have time, or some people miss class today, if you want to tell them, Jennifer, Snehi, or someone. We're missing also Don today, and Danka and Sean. Yeah, Sean said he was doing a Mani retreat with Geshe Sherab. So if they'd like to catch up, it'd be nice to join us in our discussion group on Monday. Otherwise, we'll do our dedication now. Mary Ellen's going to put up for us. Due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very state. May the supreme, precious bodhicitta that has not arisen in me arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but grow evermore. And then the swift return prayer that was composed by the Dalai Lama. peerless teacher, and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, venerable, victorious Losang, it means Lama Tsongkhapa, considered as a Buddha, the conqueror Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage and all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please now bestow the virtue of good and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings, so that has the part of Lama Zopa's name, Tup 10, in it. Muni is Tub and 10 is teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience, Sopa, that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and striving from other sentient beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this, I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings, the oceanic blessings of the three jewels, we say the undeceiving truth, and the great waves of the mind generation, the bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of the new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. You teachers who are eyes for my viewing all the infinite scriptures, you open them up so that I can see them. Supreme gateway for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, all illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. So then make a final dedication more meditative, thinking we've created merits today, having motivated at the beginning, having heard from the side of the object, sublime teaching on emptiness. We've created merits in the past, also in this life, in the future lives, dedicating them all to our continued rebirth without interruption in the future, to keep that flame of bodhicitta and realization of emptiness alive from life to life, up to and including the state of emptiness for the sole purpose of achieving Buddhahood in order to remove sentient beings out of suffering, place them into everlasting happiness of enlightenment. I dedicate these virtues that I've created, the collection of merit and the collection of wisdom, due to these merits, due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Buddha in order to lead each and every sentient being to that same state. And seeing those elements, the dedicator, the objects, the goals dedicated to, and the act of dedication as empty of inherent existence. There's no I, the way that I ordinarily grasp to myself and gives rise to all of pride and depression, to anger, attachment, and ignorance, jealousy, and so forth. It does exist conventionally, but it just exists as the mere I, the merely imputed I. The goals dedicated to seem to my mind's eye to be inherently existent, findable somehow, but they themselves will arise conventionally as merely imputed phenomena as a result of our actions. The act of dedication lacks any intrinsic existence, any inherent existence. It can't be found anywhere. If it were inherently existent, it could be found somewhere, but it can't be found under analysis. So meditate on the emptiness of the three spheres of our dedication. Okay. So thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again next week, possibly on Monday. Please spread the word to those who weren't here. The recording will be available soon. And once the Zoom recording expires, many of you know this, it's at that point, it's up on YouTube. So see you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you.
Thanks all of you for coming.